I'd like to call about Justice Jordan to come and render his decision.
Well, I have made my decision, but we're going to take a vote. So, for the first question, is the disinheritance clause unenforceable due to uncertainty? How many find that it is void for uncertainty? Anyone? How many agree that it's certain enough to be valid? Okay. I concur. Unlike some of the other older cases, the draftsperson, I believe, went sufficiently far to make it clear for the court and for the beneficiaries to determine whether they satisfied the condition, which I think is what is required. The next big question: would the disinheritance clause be void on public policy grounds? I gotta look at my... Okay. How many find that the clause should be struck? How many find that the clause should not be struck and is valid? Okay. I found that the clause is invalid as against public policy. I struck it down. I was not satisfied that it achieved what its stated goal was, that it would encourage Jewish continuity. If, unlike the Shapira case, which provided for a gift over to the state of Israel, this one instead went to the other child, which I didn't think would do anything to encourage Jewish continuity. I saw it more as a punishment. I saw it as requiring marriage. If he wasn't married, which I thought was not proper, I thought it encouraged divorce under the circumstances. The testator was aware that his son was about to marry a non-Jewish woman, and if he kept that will in its current form, it would encourage him to divorce that spouse, which is, I think, quite clearly against public policy. I think also that generally, if I looked at that clause and I substituted something else other than Jewish in there, that I would have struck it down much easier. And so I thought if it said, well, it must marry a Catholic person or an African American or something like that, I think I would have not hesitated in striking it down. And I was not satisfied that the goal of continuing Jewish continuity was addressed properly by the... I was not satisfied that that was properly addressed in the will. I also didn't like the fact that he didn't tell his son about the clause in the will. If he was trying to encourage something through his will, then it only made sense for him to explain that to his son and tell him what was in the cards. So that's, for what it's worth, that's what I decided. Is a parent's moral obligation to include a child in his or her will legally enforceable? In other words, the way I looked at this is, did Howard have a dependent support claim and under the SLRA? How many felt that that he could maintain a dependent support claim? So not many. How many felt that he did not, he could not? Okay. Again, I am in the minority. I find that, at least for argument's sake anyway, that the fact that Tatarin brings in moral obligations and that the Court of Appeal in Cummings has adopted that and said that moral obligations are in effect legal obligations, that the father had a legal obligation to provide adequate and proper support to his child, his son. I'm not going to deal with quantum, but my view would be that by bringing in moral obligations And a court of appeal rendering a judgment on the issue of moral obligations makes moral obligations legal obligations. And I find that there was a moral obligation to ensure that your child is properly supported. Ironically, if the father had given Howard a dollar before death, he would have clearly been as support, or he clearly would have been a dependent, and then all bets would be off, and he'd be in the door and be able to advance moral claims. And so I'm going to be cutting edge and say that that might be a possibility in the future. Who among us believes that the lawyer has an obligation to not draft this will or do something or not contribute to a clause that's against public policy? Does anybody have a view that as being a part of the duty? Okay, so this is one that Chuck just mentioned to me about a week ago to consider. The problem I have with this is, let's take the scenario where a client says, okay, I want to pay $100,000 to John, provided he kills my wife after death. Okay, there's a difference there, because that's not only against public policy, it's to promote commission of a crime. I think at that point, I have a duty not to draw that will. Public policy, I think, is more difficult. I think, I don't know if it's Waters, there's a point in here in one of the part of the material that talks about the fact that it's not against public policy until the court decides that it's against public policy. And I think that argument flies with me, as far as I'm not going to prohibit or not draft a will that has a clause that I'm not comfortable with because I think it's against public policy. I'm not the judge. Until a judge says it's against public policy, I'm probably going to draft that will. I will advise the client that, just so you know, I'm drafting this in accordance with your instructions. We've discussed it, and it may not fly, so better have a pretty good gift over or some other provision in that will, and you may end up not achieving anything that you're trying to achieve. But I'm not sure I play God there or play judge there and not draft it. Similarly, I mean, the question, I think, is whenever a client comes in and has a certain, let's just say, and this was one of my arguments, questions was, what happens if the testator came in and said, I want to cut my son out because he married a non-Jewish person? Don't put it anywhere in the will, but leave it all to the sister. I may have views about that I don't agree with. I think I still have to draft the will and document that. And I'm not sure we even get into this debate unless a court can go back behind the motives for drafting a will and look at public policy, discrimination, etc. I'm not sure we're certainly there yet, but that's just my final comment. Thanks so much.
Jordy, thank you. I'd like to call now on Anita Bromberg to chair the question and answer session. As you'll notice, I feel like a stewardess. Over there. There's a microphone over there for questions and a microphone over there for questions. So, Anita, if you could come up, please.
I'm sure you share my views. It's been fascinating, but I think we all have questions, so please come up to the mic. As I was preparing last night and realizing my voice was giving out, I will be very brief. I thought, well, I've got to contribute some way, so I looked up some jokes. We're in a synagogue, so, there's not a lot of jokes about lawyers, rabbis, and accountants, but here's one that I can't, well, there were a couple of jokes, but I can't tell them. You'll have to look it up yourself. But quickly, one joke, it's kiddish time after morning services, and the rabbi and the lawyer and the accountant are having a quick talk over schnapps and cake. I don't know what you have here at Shar Shamayim. And they're having a nice talk when a congregant comes up and interrupts, with some apologies, of course, and says, excuse me, Rabbi, I just need your advice about something quickly. 20 minutes later, the rabbi comes back to the conversation, shaking his head. He says, I love my congregants, but, one morning a week, I wish I could just, have my cake and eat it too. So he turns to the accountant and he says, how do you manage it? And he goes, I just try to avoid it. And the lawyer is standing very quietly and nodding, and the rabbi says, you look like you have a solution. He says, yes, absolutely. I learned when anybody comes and asks me for advice, I give it to them, but I send them a bill the next morning. 2 days later, the rabbi opens his mail. There's the bill. Okay, so I'm eager to turn the mic over to the audience now for questions. If you can make your way, as Charles indicated, to the mics. I'll start with the gentleman on my left.
I'll ask Charles. If the clause said, for instance, that I am leaving my house to my son, and as long as whoever is going to reside at that house, it's been a Jewish home for generations and generations, so as long as he brings only a Jewish wife into this home, he can keep the house, otherwise they can sell it. Is that something that would change the judgment here? Wanting to keep a home in a Jewish home?
You remind me of two things. First of all, it's a session in the Talmud where it talks about Esther. Rabbi, you'll correct me if I have the quote wrong. Al tigri bat, because the book of Esther says that she was his daughter. Elabayit, home. The wife is truly the foundation of the home. I really don't think it would make a difference. I'm reminded of my friend Larry Zeifman, who bought a cottage up in Wasaga Beach, and he showed me the initial provisions in the transfer documents, and in it says, you can't sell to a Jew. When I saw that, I was so offended, and I think the initial reaction of any court for any discriminatory practice, whether it's tied to the transfer of a piece of property or whether it's transferred to a spouse, would be to strike down the clause because it goes against and offends public policy. Thank you.
As Frank Diamond makes his way up, I just want to take one personal moment to thank Charles Wagner, who, despite his very kind words to me, you should all know he's I may be a bit of a steering wheel, but he's the motor that drove this. So my thanks, and I'm sure you join me in that.
I want to express first and foremost my sincerest thanks to you, Chuck. We've come a long way from the little gathering we had in the restaurant with a handful of some of you who are still with us to what we have today. I think the greatest compliment has been that during the break, everyone here has been talking about what's happening and has also been conveying to me the fact that this is the most enjoyable, most exciting series that we've had so far. Am I right in saying that? I want to thank Scotia Private Client Group for your wonderful support. Thank you so much, and I hope that there'll be some synergy here. And speaking of synergy, we would also like to appeal to you. I know that at events of other organizations, most of the discussion centers around what the organization hopes that you're going to do. It's not in our case. We only will take 30 seconds to ask that when you speak to some of your clients and you inform them properly, right? That's the key word. Inform them properly of the wonderful opportunities that B'nai B'rith offers as an organization caring for geriatric community, dealing in human rights, and advocating on behalf of the Jewish community, that maybe some of your clients will be inclined to support this organization. To Anita, I want to thank you for your wonderful work in working with Chuck, and I know it's been a delight for you. My honor on behalf of the organization now to thank every one of the participants here because each one of you have added immensely to today's session. Justice Jordan, even though you represented the minority opinion, nevertheless it was brilliantly presented, so thank you so much. We've got a little tribute for you, and I guess you don't have to come up. We'll get it on the way out. To Howard, want to thank you as well, and even adding to my commentary there. Let me just digress for one split second. My question was really directed as a stimulus to all of you, because there's something down the road that will result in the kind of discussion that I hope to raise. It's easy. It's very easy to deal with Jewish law because we accept the basic principle of the law of the land is the law. But there are other entities that are evolving now that look at things somewhat differently. And so I think that there is a challenge ahead for all of you at this dais on how you're going to be dealing with the whole integration of Sharia law into wills and estates and down the road. So it's something to think about. To Kelly, thank you so much again. It was a wonderful presentation, and I think everybody benefited immensely. Ian, you're just a part of our fabric, of our network. So it's as Jules said, and as we've often heard you say, you are so respectful of your heritage and what you've learned, and I think it makes us all more respectful of ours. So thank you so much for being with us. Archie, you've been with us also from the beginning, so I want to thank you for that. I know the wonderful work that you've done in other organizations as well in the community. You're a person that can always be counted on, so once again, we express our sincerest thanks to you. Rabbi Torchiner, I get the privilege of seeing you every week, sometimes having the opportunity of learning from you. I know that you're an excellent, excellent educator, and that the thought process that you present is one of being able to mesh truly the Talmud and modern law and society. And we thank you and we thank Yeshiva University, quite frankly, for producing the scholars that they have done. And thank you so much, Rabbi Tuchiner. To Greg, I can only tell you that from what I heard everyone say, they don't want to be up against you. They really don't. And I guess that is really the ultimate in compliment. So thank you so much for your presentation. And to Kimberly, thank you so much for your learned presentation. And I think that everyone, I saw them taking copious notes. So we thank you so much. And in keeping with the B'nai B'rith tradition, whether it's here or any one of our programs, we try to follow the tight schedule. I thank you so much for participating. All the best.